Feleipe Franks, how low can you go? The Gators quarterback says no more. And Jonathan Giles ready to don LSU's famed number 7 jersey. All that and more coming up on this edition of SEC Country Live. And good afternoon. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of SEC Country Live. I'm Matt Stewart. I'm filling in again for Brandon Adams, and we got our Alabama All-SEC offensive lineman, NFL offensive lineman Mike Johnson here again. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm glad everybody back with us. We don't have a ton of basketball in today. We do have a little bit of basketball flavor. We do have a little bit of basketball flavor in the top 10. Got some bracket stuff coming up, but I think it's going to be a good show. We got a lot of good stuff coming up.
Yeah, the basketball stuff is more coaching kind of stuff, and we'll hit that much later in the show. So all you football people, stick around. Before we get started with our first and 10, I kind of had this idea. My phone's been blowing up, and yours probably too, with all the NFL free agency news. Of course, Kirk Cousins is going to get 84 to 86 million. God. 3 years. I mean, it's a good job if you can get it, right? I mean, even Sam Bradford's getting 20 million for one season with the Arizona Cardinals. Gosh. It is crazy. So it got me to thinking, what would it be like if we had SEC free agency?
Free agency in the SEC.
So this is kind of our audience participation for the day. SEC free agency. We're going to limit it to players that are there. Players that are declared for the NFL early or whatever are gone from this past year. So seniors or early enrollees for the NFL, throwing those guys out. But current players that will play in 2018, we're playing this game. And I want you, don't think about it, because that ruins it. Just the first name that washes over you. If you're a general manager, you have the SEC talent pool to choose from. Who's the first guy you're going out there and you're buying, you're signing? So who's it going to be for you?
Mine is Greedy Williams, LSU cornerback. Listen, Bama needs guys in the secondary, and Greedy Williams is always the first name to pop in my mind when we talk about corners in the SEC. So listen, he would command a ton of money. He's a lockdown corner that's hard to find when you talk about the NFL or the SEC alike. But I would, just off the top of my head, you mentioned the first name to come to mind. Greedy Williams is the guy I would love to add to that Alabama program, or any other program for that matter. I think he's the best corner in the SEC. He's definitely, I won't call him a number 1 draft pick. It's hard to take a corner somewhere there. But if you're talking about free agency and adding to the team you already got, Greedy Williams is my guy for sure.
Greedy Williams, good choice. First guy pops in mind, because I thought of this guy, and then I started thinking about other guys. And I said, look, this is no fun if we sit here and think about it.
Right.
Just the first guy that pops into your mind. I'm going DeAndre Swift.
Wow.
Running back, Georgia. I mean, dude's going to get a ton of carries. They lost Nick Chubb. They lost Sony Michel. He's going to be the number 1 feature back in a great Georgia offense. And I think,
of upside.
Yeah, so I'm going DeAndre Swift. See, I'm thinking a little bit outside the box here, but you can go with the hometown favorite if you like. Certainly, there's a lot of talented quarterbacks. So that's my question to you today, is if there's SEC free agency, who's the first guy that you're drafting? Who's the first guy that you're going out there and picking for your team? So kind of some audience participation here to get things started for our hour here on SEC Country Live. Let's get started with our first and 10. And our very first topic in the first and 10 was 2017 as low as it gets for Feleipe Franks. The Gators quarterback met with the media this week for the first time since the end of last year's 4-7 season. And just some of the many quotes that he gave while he was up there standing in front of the media. I'm always a positive person. No matter how people are talking about me, I've always kept a smile on my face. My game's only going to go up from here. I hit the all-time low. It's only going to go up. Now, I don't envy the kid. I mean, especially not in this day and age of social media. The criticism can be unrelenting. But, Mike, has he hit his all-time low?
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's tough because you look at a quarterback competition that a lot of people think Feleipe Franks could lose. I think he's the favorite, but I don't know if he's a runaway favorite. You talk about all-time lows and him kind of stepping up, and you're right, he did have a ton of good quotes in that story, but I don't know if the lowest of lows has got there. I understand what he's talking about. Listen, this guy was brought in to be a little bit of a golden child. A lot of Florida fans were high on him. They thought this was when the quarterback position would make the turn at Florida. They thought this was when the Jim McElwain offense would finally make the turn at Florida. And you fast forward, listen, he gets benched twice for guys that ended up being injured or being pulled. And Jim McElwain got fired by the end of the year. So I understand what he's talking about all-time lows. But if I'm talking to Feleipe Franks, I'm telling him, listen, it definitely gets lower than that. You can definitely have some opportunities this year if you're talking about maybe being supplanted by somebody under you. Maybe Feleipe Franks finds himself at a different program next year. I don't know if all-time low is the right choice of words I would have had if I were Feleipe Franks. I think there's definitely another tier underneath what he's been going on for.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Again, it's a tough situation. He's still just a kid. And you got to stand up there in front of the media, a media that's hungry to talk to you, a media that's been waiting 3 months to ask you questions. So they've been thinking about these questions a long time, not to mention all the questions you're going to get on social media. And you got to talk extemporaneously. You got to talk off the top of your head and kind of answer these questions. And I'm sure he's been coached up a little bit, and he's thought about what he's going to say, anticipating the kind of questions he's going to get. But he did say, people don't understand the process of growing as a quarterback. Do you think it was all that people just don't understand the process, and perhaps people were a little too impatient with him, again, being the Gators quarterback, and all the things that you said, pinning on him? This is the guy. This is the guy that's going to be this is finally going to be our guy, the first guy since Tebow. We got McElwain. We're set up for success here, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up that comment because, he does say, man, fans don't understand the process of bringing a quarterback along. Well, the problem with that, Feleipe Franks, is there was true freshman quarterbacks all over the SEC that thrived last year, and you were a redshirt freshman, and you had time inside of that offense. Maybe Feleipe Franks doesn't understand, that there are ways to be a good quarterback in systems like that. It didn't mesh. He didn't mesh with whatever Jim McElwain was trying to do. Jim McElwain's message did not get across to his team. The development wasn't there at a lot of positions. I don't think I'm telling him, to blame it on fans. Listen, fans know what they expect. Fans know what good Florida football looks like. They know what good quarterback play looks like. They know what good offenses look like, and they didn't get that out of Florida. So Feleipe Franks had a lot of good quotes yesterday. He says, listen, there's a sigh of relief throughout the building now with Dan Mullen in here. He also said, listen, I've never been afraid of competition, and if I have to tote the rock, I can tote the rock, talking about being more of a running quarterback under Dan Mullen. But there was this sense for me listening to Feleipe Franks talk where he definitely feels like things are headed in the right direction. Right. Things are looking up. But I don't know if he worded them all the right way. The all-time low comment to me was the one that stuck out as just being like, I don't think you've quite gotten there just yet.
Well, Morgan said definitely it could go lower, but last year was a rough year for him, and I think we would all agree with that. Rough year for the Gators all the way around. It just turned into an unmitigated disaster, dumpster fire, whatever kind of analogy you want to use here. But the question I have is, and you brought up, is Dan Mullen. I mean, this is not your typical Dan Mullen quarterback to begin with. Is perhaps Emory Jones, the kid that they flipped from Ohio State late and got him on National Signing Day. Is this more of the Dan Mullen type quarterback, the big physical dual threat quarterback, the guy with which he had his ultimate success with Tim Tebow at Florida, with Dak Prescott and guys like that at Mississippi State? So is Franks ultimately even going to be the guy that ends up being the #1 quarterback going forward into the season? This is an audition period here in spring practice.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say. We talked about this a little bit yesterday because the conversation was brought up to Dan Mullen when he was first at when he was originally at Florida, Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. Maybe you find a combination of ways to get both these guys on the field. Dan Mullen also did that in year #1 at Mississippi State with Chris Relf. You can find a way to mix these guys in. Definitely, I think Emory Jones. Listen. Backup quarterbacks, the true freshman quarterbacks, it was kind of an anomaly last year where a lot of these guys are getting on the field, and you look at Jake Fromm and Tua, and you look at some of these guys around the SEC. To get them on the field was a big deal. I don't know if we're looking at that situation with Emory Jones. I think a lot of Florida fans hope you are. I've mentioned a couple times on the show, I think that everything being even, you get him out there and let him take the lumps early. I don't know that the development's going to be there with the arm right off the bat, but I will say this: Dan Mullen has done wonders with quarterbacks in the past, so I do expect at some point him to be the guy. I don't want to fall into the spell where we just crown Emory Jones because he's the new guy, because he's the prospect. There's other guys in the roster that can play quarterback. But I think he's definitely has the most upside when you look at Dan Mullen's offense and the way he can move with his feet.
Yeah, freshmen never come in and make an immediate impact, right? Jake Fromm?
Yeah.
That never happens. So, but Dan Mullen is here for this reason. I mean, for a lot of reasons. Number one, the Gators were terrible last year after winning back-to-back SEC Eastern Division titles, mind you. But he's here because of the quarterback situation, because it has been inexplicable, because they have had five-star guys, plenty of five-star guys, and none of them It's amazing. None of them have panned out since the days of Tim Tebow.
Yeah, you know what's funny is a couple of those guys have, we talk about Jeff Driscoll and some of the other, Brantley, some of those guys have panned out other places, NC State, Louisiana Tech. And you know what's funny about it, too, is, I played under Jim McElwain at Alabama. Jim McElwain was a guy that was brought to Florida to turn around the quarterback competition. That was what he was. He was a quarterback, an offensive coach, a guy that can get in there, really make things work offensively even without a quarterback. And yet here we are, after a couple, like you mentioned, SEC East title runs to where Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen in that Florida program are kind of back to square one. Who can get these quarterbacks turned around down there? Esteban
says by week 4, Jones will take over and be the starting quarterback at Florida. If you're a Gators fan, I think you're hoping if there is going to be a switch at quarterback, that isn't happening week 4, because that means something bad has happened in the first month of the season.
That's kind of my question for Florida fans, and Esteban's a guy we talk to pretty often here on the show. Why wait till week 4? Why wait till week 4 if we're going to go through those?
That means something bad's happening.
Florida's schedule's not that daunting to open up the season with. I don't know if I'm waiting till week 4. Like I said at the top of the show, if everything's equal and Emory Jones and Feleipe Franks are right here to where you think, man, at some point Emory Jones could make that leap and be the starting quarterback, I have no problem. If I'm a Florida fan, I have no problem with him getting on the field early. I think that this season, listen, you want to win all your games, you want to make a run. But this season, at the end of the year, I don't know that it's going to mean a ton. I think, you're going to have your ups and downs under Dan Mullen in year 1, but everything's going to kind of be a wash. I think that you start looking at 2019 if you're looking at Emory Jones.
All right, 1st and 10. Let's move along to number 2, and LSU. Big honor for Jonathan Giles. If you even know who this guy is, he was a big-time wide receiver at Texas Tech, had 69 catches, over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns in 2016. And he decided he wanted to transfer. So he did. He ends up at LSU, sat out last year. He's ready to play now. He's going to wear number 7. And if you're not familiar, number 7 is a kind of a big deal at LSU. Number, yeah. Kind of a big deal. Patrick Peterson, Leonard Fournette, the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu wear number 7. DJ Chark most recently wears number 7. This kid's not stepped on the field yet. Not in a game at least, and Giles is going to wear number 7 coming up in 2018. Is he ready for this?
That's a great question. I don't know a lot about Jonathan Giles. I don't think anybody in the SEC does.
We know what he did in the Big 12.
Yeah, when you look at the article that I was reading earlier today, and you look at some of the quotes from some of the coaches, he's known as maybe the most explosive player on the team. And this is, by the way, this is an LSU wide receiver core that's absolutely loaded with stud, the guys that have come out, prospects out of high school, that they have all the length in the world, they have all the speed in the world, and yet this is the guy. This is kind of a head scratch for me. This is the guy out of that entire program that you look to and say, that's the number 7. I think that says more about him as a player and as what they think he can be than the rest of the team. Because if you're telling me a guy's going to walk through the door, and obviously, as a transfer, he's been there a while, but he has gained that much respect in that short amount of time to where they want to lump his name in with those great number 7s at LSU. I just hope it pans out. Is it too much pressure for him? That's kind of my question. I know the guy's going to be explosive. Miles Brennan, what are you going to be at quarterback? We've talked about it a ton. But Jonathan Giles, in my opinion, just listen, to everybody coming out of that LSU program. I think it's a big deal, and obviously they think he's worthy of the number. This is huge news for me because I've always respected that LSU program, and everybody wears that number, and the number 18 being the same way down there. But man, it's a head scratcher for me. I got to admit, to have a guy that hasn't even been on the field yet for this team, to award him that number 7 is kind of a shock to me.
Jake says he's going to be All-American wide receiver. Jonathan says Big 12 LOL, and I agree in that regard. And certainly they did not give him his number 7 based on his statistics in the Big 12. I think we all understand you're going to have inflated numbers. What does 69 catches, over 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns in the Big 12 translate to in the SEC?
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as good.
Is that 45 catches? Is that 50 catches? 800 yards, 7 touchdowns?
Maybe you cut them in half. I
don't think you go that far.
Yeah, I don't know. The air raid offenses are all over the place in the Big 12. There's just not a ton of defense. But as we saw when Oklahoma faced off against Georgia, the best of the best, really, when you talk about defenses and offenses in the country last year, they were able to pull even in a lot of different ways. So I won't discount them a ton, but it is. I think I read more into what the coaches are saying about him, and I guess I give him more of a benefit of the doubt that he is going to get the number 7. That they do, like I said, feel that way. That reportedly, one of the fastest guys on the team, one of the most explosive players. I think he's going to get a chance to return kicks this year, much like some of the other guys that have worn that number in the past. So I'm going to go with Coach O here and everybody else in the support staff around him if they believe in his number 7. I guess that I should be really keeping my head on a swivel for Jonathan Giles. It's just, all of a sudden he's exploding on the scene and everybody's expecting a ton out of this kid.
Esteban checks back in and says, they gave 7 to Fournette coming out of high school, St. Augustine High School in New Orleans, but that was Fournette. I mean, everybody knew about Fournette. I mean, that wasn't a surprise, and Giles is maybe just a little bit more under the radar, maybe just for the mainstream. Maybe you LSU fans, you're all on top of this thing, and you're all on board with him getting number 7. I thought it was funny, though. He was relating the story about how he ends up at LSU because he made it clear that he was going to transfer from Texas Tech, and so the schools were lined up. As like we've talked about before on Monday. It's kind of like the second recruiting season now, transfers, and so you make it known you want to leave and schools start contacting you, come pay us a visit and all that kind of stuff. He says he gets a call at 6:30 a.m. and on the other end of the phone is, "I love your film. I love the way you play. I want you to come play for us." Didn't even identify himself. I'm sorry, that's probably not a good Coach O, and I guess maybe a little thankful I don't sound like Coach O, but that was my best imitation of Coach O, so I apologize for that. But I thought it was funny, and he said that immediately made an impact, that Coach O calls him, doesn't even say, "Hey, this is Coach Ed Orgeron from LSU." Just 6:30 in the morning, wakes him up and says, "I love your tape."
Yeah,
I love your tape.
I think Ross Dellinger had a great story when you talk about what where this kid has come from, what he's been. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, actually Jamon Moore was one of his teammates back in high school, and he has a quote right here. "The spotlight on Giles is growing brighter by the week. Orgeron proclaimed him as a starter on February 7th. Proclaimed this guy as a starter on February 7th. Strength coach Tommy Moffitt, who is world-renowned, Scott Cochran learned under him, told the Advocate he is pound for pound the strongest player on the football team. Later, special teams coordinator Greg McMahon, in a radio interview, anointed him as DJ Chark's heir apparent at punt returner. Then, on February 27th, the school announced that Giles, despite not playing yet in a single game for LSU, will wear the prestigious number 7 jersey." And that's kind of what I'm pointing to with all the praise that everybody's been giving him. I mean, this guy was anointed a starter over a month ago, and we haven't even seen him in an LSU jersey yet on the SEC fans. It becomes such a huge honor. We have a bunch of people in the comment section on YouTube over here talking about number 18 for this team too. A lot of people expect Devin White or Rashard Lawrence to get that number. That's also a very hallowed number for that team too. So just kind of holding those two numbers up and kicking around some of the names that have been under some of those jerseys for LSU, and then throwing Jonathan Giles into that heap. Boy, that's high praise for sure.
That is high praise, and it goes beyond just LSU. You think about the guys that we mentioned wearing that number 7. Fournette, Pro Bowl caliber running back at the National Football League level with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Patrick Peterson, probably should have been the MVP of the Pro Bowl this past year, and the Honey Badger. I mean, you think about it, it goes beyond. So when you get that number 7, it's not just about success at LSU. This is projected NFL success. They're thinking you are that caliber guy. And I think you told me Burt Jones.
Yeah, Burt Jones. Burt Jones is another name.
Famous quarterback.
I don't know who Burt Jones is. I got to admit, I asked him who Burt Jones was. And
I didn't see Burt Jones at LSU, but I remember Burt Jones in the NFL with the Baltimore Colts. Great quarterback. So, it's a big number. All right, let's move along in our 1st and 10 to item number 3. And this is kind of piggybacking off something you guys talked about yesterday when Peter Burns, SEC Network, put out his rankings of SEC quarterbacks. And to refresh your memory, here is his list. Jarrett Stidham, number 1 on his list at Auburn. I think, just as far as experience and best pure quarterback and all the numbers and stuff like that, I don't have much of a debate with that. Drew Lock, I certainly have a big debate with. And we're going to talk more about Drew Lock. I think here's a guy whose numbers are overly inflated. I don't think he's the second best in the conference. Jake Fromm, certainly, given what he did in a kind of a protected offense, let's face it, not until late in the season did they ask Fromm to really win games for them. They had the combination of the running, but nothing wrong with that. Kid doesn't make mistakes. He's high on my list. But Nick Fitzgerald at number 7 behind the combination of Alabama quarterbacks, and I guess it goes back to the criteria of your quarterback, and I know you guys covered this yesterday. So let's talk about Nick Fitzgerald's reaction, the crying man emojis
Do we have
across the
that
board.
tweet, keyed up for
There it is. The crying man emojis, the laughing crying, not crying, sad, laughing crying emojis at being number 7 on that list.
Yeah, it's kind of a passive aggressive, I guess, response to Peter Burns right there. It doesn't say, man, your rankings are wrong. It doesn't say, I should be this, I should be that. Just kind of laughs at him. And maybe this, listen. I look at this from a player's perspective. I think this becomes a little bit of motivation for Nick Fitzgerald. I think he's rehabbing from that injury. We showed a tape of him jogging a couple of weeks ago. That's a big deal. This is an injury that I actually had during my football career. It is tough to get back to that stage where you can run around and scramble around and be the player that you used to be. I think he uses this as a little bit of a launching pad. I think that he played this right way. Look, I'm not gonna blow up. I'm just giving you the laughing man emoji 8 times across the screen, and that's how I feel about your rankings. I don't know. There's so much different criteria. What are you expecting to be in 2018? What were they in 2017? Is this about winning games? Is this about statistics? But Nick Fitzgerald at 7, I understand why he's got a gripe. The question yesterday that we led off with was, does Bama really have 2 quarterbacks that are better than 8 other teams? It's sitting there at 5 and 6 on the list, better than 8 other teams' quarterbacks in the SEC. I got to tell you, though, I couldn't come up with anybody that really could supplant some of those. I couldn't come up, it's weird that there's not an LSU quarterback or a Tennessee quarterback or a Florida quarterback.
Who is the LSU quarterback? Miles Brennan probably.
Yeah, right.
But it's an open competition.
All those teams have those open competitions.
Yeah, I don't think you can put Miles Brennan on that list ahead of any of those 7.
I told, we talked about it yesterday. I think the next name on that list, you're probably looking at Jordan Ta'amu at Ole Miss. I think he starts to pop his head into a lot of these discussions with that offense that they should have going with that wide receiver core that he has at Ole Miss. But listen, I understand Nick Fitzgerald, kind of looking at this and laughing. Where does he kind of fit in the scheme of things? Only time will tell, though. I think a lot of people are waiting to see, and I don't blame Peter Burns for ranking him where he's at. I mentioned yesterday I would shuffle up a couple of things, but Nick Fitzgerald, for me, kind of fits right there. I don't know what he's going to be under Joe Moorhead. Was he a better quarterback under Dan Mullen? Did Dan Mullen make Nick Fitzgerald look better than he did? Those are going to be questions that he's going to have to answer in the upcoming year. At 7 right now for me, I understand the gripe, but I also understand where Peter Burns is coming from.
All right, Jeremy says Tua going to be the number 1 quarterback on that list by the end of the year. Might be right. I don't know that I can sit here on this date and say that ain't happening. I think there's probably a strong possibility that could happen. Jerome says Jake Bentley, all caps, exclamation point, Nick should be upset. I think Bentley's a solid quarterback, but I would tend to agree with Jerome. If I'm making a list, I think I have to put Fitzgerald for pure dynamicism. How do you say? Is that a word? Dynamicism. I'm inventing words here, but you get the point. For pure explosion, I think I go with Fitzgerald over Bentley there. Although I think Bentley, and I use this in all due respect, is a great game manager, doesn't make mistakes, and I think that's, in my book, that's huge for a quarterback. And then Rick is posted in support of Drew Lock, and again, we're going to touch on Drew Lock a little bit later.
Listen, Steve Weaver says Bentley way down the list, and Cliff Nelson chimes in and says Brennan will be top 3 by midseason. Boy, Cliff, you love your LSU Tigers, don't you, brother? To say Brennan is going to
maybe if Jonathan Giles is all that, then maybe he will be.
Yeah, and listen, I think there's a way for that to happen. I think that the talent is going to be there at the wide receiver position. It could make Miles Brennan look extremely good, but boy, if you're going to talk about Miles Brennan being at number 3, who are you talking about kicking off that list? Are you saying he passes Jake Fromm, he passes Jake Bentley, he passes Nick Fitzgerald, he passes Tua Tagovailoa, he passes Drew Lock, and he passes Jared Stidham all on that list? I think that's a little bit tough for me to ask. Could he be in the top 7? Could Miles Brennan be on that top 7 list by the end of the year? Absolutely. Top 3 for me is a little bit out of reach.
And John Bradford just posted, great post, by the way, John. You're right. This was not our list, by the way. This was Peter Burns' list, SEC Network. We're just reacting to it. So we didn't make the list, but you're right. Nick Starkel not on the list. That's kind of a travesty. I think Starkel certainly is a top 7 quarterback in the SEC.
I think when he's healthy, but it's the same thing going on with Texas A&M with their quarterback competition. He's going to have Kellen Mond, really, who started a ton of games. By the way, Kellen Mond looked great against Bama at times last year. Kellen Mond almost brought them back against Alabama, and so he's going to get a little bit of burn. I'm with you on the Nick Starkel thing. I think Nick Starkel's got an extremely high ceiling. What is he going to be in Jimbo's offense? That kind of goes along the same lines with me. LSU in the quarterback competition, Tennessee quarterback competition. I think Texas A&M has probably better option than those 2 quarterback competitions, But still, for me, Nick Starkel hasn't supplanted himself as that guy. But listen, going back to that, though, if you're going to put Jalen and Tua both on there, then you can make the argument that maybe Nick Starkel belongs as well.
So, Peter Burns created quite the firestorm. So good for you. You did exactly what you wanted to do. I mean, you came up with a list and you generated a lot of talk about it. Yeah, I mean, so you did exactly. Good job, Peter Burns, for doing that, because you did exactly what you set out to do. And that's, create conversation. And that's what it's all about in March. In defense of his number 7 ranking of Nick Fitzgerald, he said, number 1, the broken ankle.
Yeah.
And that's no small thing for a dual threat quarterback to come back from a broken ankle. And number 2, Dan Mullen's is not the coach anymore.
Yeah.
He's got Joe Moorhead, great offensive coordinator there at Penn State, had big numbers, had success with Trace McSorley. You would think that continues, but there's still that unknown there. We haven't seen him, playing for Joe Moorhead, and we won't see it in the spring. So I think there is some defensible positions you can take with that number 7 ranking.
Yeah, Steve Weaver, one of the Bama fans in the comment section, chimes in and says LSU should be happy with a quarterback in the top 10 of the conference. I got to tell you, it's been a while since they've. And I was on Danny Etling's bandwagon. I think that he was. A little bit underrated going into last year. I thought he played decently well as a quarterback for LSU last year. But I do think LSU is at that point where, listen, if we can get a guy in the top 10, I think we're going to be a very serviceable team this year. Does that put you in the SEC championship game with just a top 10 quarterback? No, but I think that's where you need to start off kind of aiming when you talk about Lowell, Narcisse, Miles Brennan, whoever it may be, Justin McMillian. I think that you have to start off trying to climb that rope, as soon as spring starts.
And Jeremy hits us back and says, that Fitzgerald's not even, is not better than Jalen Hurts. And on this, I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan. It's just a matter of having both those guys on there. How's that going to work? Because I don't think both of them are getting significant playing time.
Yeah.
One or the other is getting significant playing time this year. Now, if we're just rating those quarterbacks based on pure talent, whether they're playing or not, yeah, I agree. Both those guys need to be high on that list. But as it pans out this year, I think only one of those guys is getting these significant snaps. I don't think they're going to be playing. I don't think they're going to have a dual quarterback, 50-50 split, quarterback system at Alabama anytime soon, and not this year, even with those 2 quarterbacks.
That's tough for me to see too, and I've admitted that at times. Listen, I'd love for Jalen to stay on campus. I still think Tua is going to be the starting quarterback when next year kicks off. I think that Nick Saban is going to try to give Jalen Hurts some type of role in the offense, but I'm with you. I don't think either one of them – this is definitely a pre-2018 season, not a post, because I don't think either one of those guys, whichever one's not the starter, I don't think the backup gets enough snaps to make this list by the end of the year. I mean, if you're just looking at it from performance perspective, then yeah, that's why Jalen's on the list. I don't know that Jalen makes enough of an impact in 2018 that he really gets back to that number 6 rank.
All right, let's move along in our first and 10 here. Item number 4, and, credit ESPN for putting out this list. The kind of what if there was a 64-team college football playoff bracket, like, of course, you have a 64 team for college basketball. Look, I'd be happy with an 8-team playoff myself, or 16. I'm all for expanding the playoffs. I think it just makes it more fun. Eliminate those boring bowl games that don't mean anything and turn them into games that mean something, a shot at the playoff. I say go to 8 now. Should have gone to 8 before, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about this 64-team bracket, and they're probably right. Look at this. They're projecting, based on their ESPN preseason football power index, that based on those numbers, if there was a 64-team football bracket, that all but Vanderbilt, 13 of the 14 teams from the SEC, would be in this 64-team field, and I cannot disagree with that.
Yeah, it's tough, too. I mean, the argument that I know that Brandon Adams would be making, you guys have heard from Brandon Adams enough to know this, he'd be saying Arkansas belongs nowhere in this field. Arkansas might be the 100th ranked team.
14th seed.
14th seed is, I mean, you talk about top 64 teams. Can Arkansas do that under Chad Morris? We don't know. I just know.
You don't think they're top 64 in the country?
Arkansas, there's just not a ton of talent. They've got a little bit at the wide receiver position. Maybe you look at the running back position and say they have some talent, but their offensive line is missing what's going to be their best player. Obviously, some of those positions on defense are going to be up for grabs this year under a new head coach. I think this is an interesting bracket for a number of reasons. Number one, they didn't have an SEC team winning the national championship. They gave the national championship to Clemson. So at some point, every SEC team got knocked out by some other team. So I have the list right
and
here.
And some of them SEC teams beat SEC teams, which is going to happen if everybody in the conference but one team is in your 64-team field. You're going to have some you're going to have some cannibalism.
Yeah, and there definitely was. I have every team that was in the brackets lost right here. Number 3, Michigan State beats number 14, Arkansas. That's an easy one for me. Number 11, Kansas State actually knocks out a 6-seed Florida Gators football team. I'm not even sure Florida needs to be a number 6 seed this year, but that's another conversation. Number 9, TCU beats out number 8, Missouri. Number 4, Miami beats out number 12, Ole Miss.
I mean, and nothing that you said now shakes my world by any means.
No, I can't. The 11 seed over 6 Florida is a little bit shaky, but I don't know that Florida should have been up that high to begin with. Number 5 seed Texas beats out number 4 seed Mississippi State. Number 4 seed Mississippi State, it's a big seed for them. Number 3, Michigan beats out number 14 Kentucky. Number 10, Baylor. Number 10, Baylor beats out a number 7 South Carolina team in this bracket. That's a little bit of a head scratch for me. I don't know if Baylor's ready to take that on just yet. Number 4, Stanford.
They get all their players out of jail.
Yeah, they got a ton of hurdles. You talk about South Carolina team on the rise that we're going to talk later about maybe being a bracket buster. That's a tough loss for them. Number 4, Stanford beats out number 5, Texas A&M. Number 3, Michigan State beats out number 7 seed LSU. Boy, the Bama people aren't going to like this one. The 2 seed Auburn in the regional final actually beats out number 1 Alabama.
That happened this year.
It definitely did happen this year. That's hard for me to admit, but it definitely is something that happened this year.
It did happen. That's not really a stretch of the imagination.
Auburn turns around just like this year. Auburn turns around and gets knocked out by Georgia as the number 1 Georgia seed. Yeah. That definitely happened this year. And then Clemson beats Georgia for the national title. So a lot of cool things, a lot of cool in and outs there. We can talk about what the seedings are, who deserved to be in the tournament, who didn't.
Well, for instance, Jake, posted he feels like LSU's a 4 seed. In this bracket, they have LSU as a 7 seed, the equivalent of what South Carolina is. I would tend to agree with you, Jake, that LSU is a 4 seed. They got Mississippi State as a 4 seed, even though Mississippi State cleaned their clock this year.
Yeah.
I would tend to probably have LSU at least the equivalent of a Mississippi State in my bracket.
Or Texas A&M. I mean, Texas A&M's at a 5 seed. I could easily see LSU sliding up into that role of being that kind of 5 seed team. And it's a lot to kick around and it's a lot to take in. I will butt up against your point that you made at the top of this segment, though. Not in favor of an 18 playoff. I don't know. I know that that's the latest rage, and everybody talks about
all you're doing is you're taking those teams that are right now playing in meaningless exhibition games, bowl games, and you're now just placing them into a meaningful game. Don't we need? Look, we all love college football, and when December comes, people are watching the Gildan, New Mexico Bowl. I
love those bowls, man. I love watching bowl season.
Do you watch? Okay, let's see. Who played in
the Bahamas Bowl?
The New Mexico Bowl this year was the Arizona Bowl was New Mexico State and somebody else.
I have no idea.
Exactly. But did you watch you wouldn't, on any given Saturday, you would never be watching New Mexico State, but you found yourself watching New Mexico State probably during the bowl season because you're just so hungry. Let's make those games worth something.
Well, New Mexico State's not going to be in the college ball playoff.
No. The point I'm making is we're hungry for games. We're so hungry for games, we'll watch a team like New Mexico State.
Exactly.
So why not? Let's just take these bowl games, these New Year's Six bowl games that don't really mean anything at all. It's a meaningless honor to be New Year's Six because it doesn't go anywhere. The game needs to go someplace, and so 18 playoff. I'm all for it, and I think they should have already done it, and I think they will eventually do it.
Yeah, and Shannon Burgess in the comment section said, I've wanted an 18 playoff from the time it was announced. It was going to be a 14. But Dan Riggins kicks right back and says the 14 playoff worked just fine last year. And I know that's going to be an arguing point for a lot of different people in this. You know what? Here's what I'll say.
But you give 4 more teams a shot, and and so what? And what if you say they don't deserve it? They get beat, and then the team and they go. But at least you have a game that means something. You have, let's say, you have Wisconsin and you have Ohio State. I guess based on this year's rankings, they get in. They're instead of playing a bowl game that doesn't mean anything, they're now involved in a game that does mean something. UCF, the big flashpoint of this 18 playoff. You can put a UCF in. You can put a UCF in this thing, and now we've defeated all this speculation about just how good they are, And Auburn, they play Auburn now. Instead of playing Auburn in a bowl game that doesn't mean anything to Auburn, maybe that becomes a playoff, and now it means something to Auburn. Maybe we have the same result, maybe we don't.
How about I meet you in the middle, though? How about I come up with this? Why not just a 16 playoff, and then the 1 and 2 seeds get a bye into the second round of the playoff, and then all of a sudden 3 and 6 play each other, 4 and 5 play each other, and it still means something to finish the regular season as the #1 team in the country. Because you know me, I come from that BCS era where it was special to have the #1 and #2
because you played at Alabama, man, and you guys were in it every year.
Now you're going to tell me that
it was rigged, man.
I couldn't even tell you who the number 8
I'm joking
team.
about it being rigged, but I mean, someone's saying it worked well for you guys, but you were at Alabama,
right? I couldn't even tell you who the number 8 seed was, though,
right?
Last year.
Yeah. The guys that were, though, they remember.
I think.
So you were at Alabama. You guys were special. You guys were great. I mean, so let's say you're the 1 seed. What problem would you have had of playing the 8 seed and then winning that game and playing the winner of the 4-5 game and then the national championship? You guys were great. Y'all could have handled it, right?
Right, but I think you're bringing a ton of things in there. First of all,
and hey, look, the season's too long. Get rid of those. Those FCS games that you play.
I agree with that.
I mean, chop off a game at the front of the season if you have to.
I agree with that.
And everybody in the conference does it. Everybody plays an FCS, along the way, or a low mid-major. Just get rid of that game and replace it with something meaningful, and then we can defeat this argument that there's too many games in the season.
I have a hard time as a guy that was on a team that finished the season as the #1 ranked team to think that there's going to be a team in the 8th seed that probably lost 2 games that didn't do near as much as me. They're going to end up at the same spot when the first round of the playoffs touches up. That's my gripe with the whole thing. I just think that, listen, if anything, like I said, 6 teams, get the top 2 teams a bye, let everybody gut it out. Because what happens is this. All of a sudden, #1 plays number 8, and I don't know who it would have been back in 2009. I don't know, TCU or something like that.
But this year, it would have been,
maybe
Clemson
UCF.
and UCF in the first.
Then what
round.
happens when Clemson takes the field and their quarterback hurts his ankle? And then all of a sudden you've got to play a week left.
That's football, man.
In years past, that could
happen in October. That could happen in November. I agree with Jess here. It's AJ. AJ says, and this is, obviously it makes sense. I mean, the 5 power conference teams, you got to reward the conference champions. Basically, they've rendered conference championships irrelevant when teams win conference championships in Power 5 conferences and then they don't make the playoff. I mean, so basically, if you take the 5 conference champions of the 5 power conference teams, that actually becomes a part of the playoff. Yeah. Your conference championship game is really the first week of the playoffs, and then you got 3 at-large teams. See, I would even take it, and we're going to move on because we're running out of time here. But I would even that
it's
weekend.
A good topic, though.
I know that weekend. Just bear with me here. You might not get my explanation because it is a little screwy. But the week you got the 5 power conference championship games, you take 6 teams and you have 3 wild card games. And so the teams that didn't make the 6 best teams that didn't make their conference championship games get thrown into a wild card. Alabama would have been in that wild card game this week, so they're not getting a week off while Auburn and Georgia are killing each other trying to get into the playoff. Alabama's got to play in a playoff too to get in the national playoff.
That's a good point.
And so you take the 3 wild card winners, you got your 5 champions, you got your 8, and there you go.
That's fair enough.
Then right before Christmas you play a quarterfinal, and then right there at New Year's you play your semifinals. And then, 10, 11 days later, that first Monday, you got your national championship game. And it's all great because we all get great college football, meaningful college football games, not just 3 meaningful college football games, but meaningful college football games all the way through the month of December, including the conference championship games, because you got to win that to guarantee a spot in the playoff.
Tyler Mann says Matt is spot on with this one.
All right.
And Cliff Nelson agrees with me. He says 6 teams, the top 2 getting a bye is the way to go. I would even argue, too, that maybe we put a home game in there.
The bye. No, I agree. The quarterfinals need to be home sites.
Home games.
Got to be home sites. Quarterfinals got to be home sites. Otherwise, you're asking the fans way too much travel. That's too taxing, especially with the price of tickets and travel to go to neutral sites. But the problem I have with and I know you're right. We could
talk on this all day.
3 a.m. we could still be talking and not settle anything. The problem is with the buys is that's just, to me, the buy is too unfair an advantage In the NFL, you got the buys, and you see how important the buys are to those teams. Those teams earn the buys on a playing field that's pretty level. You know, if you get a buy,
they're in the regular season. It's kind of goes back to my point.
But you're playing everybody in the NFL, and in college football, it's still apples and oranges. You're comparing schedules, and if you pick a 1 seed and a 2 seed, the 3 seed's like, well, we deserve to be a 1 and a 2. I want to get away from selections. I want to get.
You want to get away from the eye test.
I want to get away from. I want to get into a situation where you're earning your way by winning your conference championship or winning those wild card games to get into the playoff.
Yeah.
There's just no, hey, you're great, you look great, you got all the tradition, we're putting you in. So there you go.
Fair
all
enough.
right, let's move along here to item number 5 on our 1st and 10. And this is Jimbo Fisher, and they're talking to Jimbo about recruiting and dating. And this takes us back to the controversial, coaches really struggle with this thing with players that, commit to the school and then they keep taking visits.
Yeah.
And he compared it to like getting married. And I wouldn't say married. And here's the quote. I always asked him this. He's asking the recruits this. When you're getting married and she says she's going to marry you and then she says she wants to go on 2 more dates, are you going to let her? If he's still visiting other schools, you better have a plan because there's something there. I agree with that, but you know what? It's kind of like this scenario right here. When you get engaged, it's not official yet.
Right.
I mean, the engagements still get broken off, right? Guys still or girls still get left at the altar sometimes. So it's not official until you get married. And so it's a pretty good analogy, but it's maybe not working in his favor there. And I get it. If you commit to somebody, you get engaged, typically you don't keep dating other people.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you get around this thing in college football.
Yeah, I don't either. And I actually enjoy the cross-reference here from Jimbo Fisher because I think he's spot on. I think, when you're, listen, I'm not going to go too deep into relationships and all that stuff, and a lot of these guys in the comment section know I got engaged not too long ago, so I'm crossing this bridge now. But you date people moving up, and you figure out what you want, and then you commit to one person.
Right.
And that's what Jimbo's talking about with the school things. If you're going to commit to Texas A&M, commit to Texas A&M. I don't want you going on any other dates like Jimbo was saying.
Okay. But how many times has Jimbo, and I don't know this, but I know schools do pull scholarships. It is not exactly as Jimbo Fisher describes it, and you know better than me. I've covered recruiting for quite some time in my life. You went through the process. I never did. You can actually speak to it better than I can. But how many times it's not really like an engagement. Sometimes it's coercion.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, okay, we've got an offer for you now, but you have to commit to us now, or we're going to take our offer somewhere else. That doesn't sound like any kind of engagement that I've ever heard of. You're not down on your one knee to the love of your life, your high school sweetheart, saying, I want to marry you, but if you don't say yes now, I got to go talk to Susie because I gotta cover my bases.
Yeah.
So I get the analogy. It sounds great with recruits. In some cases it applies. In some cases it doesn't. But I don't see how you keep kids from continuing the recruiting process until they sign that paper, because they got to cover their bases too, because schools do pull scholarships. Schools do change their minds. Schools do leave players at the altar sometimes.
Yeah, well, my problem, if I'm going to nitpick what Jimbo's saying, is all of a sudden, you do marry that school, and then all of a sudden that partner that you got, that head coach, that Jimbo Fisher, the guys he recruited to Florida State, all of a sudden your partner changes in the middle of this marriage. All of a sudden that partner that you committed to, that head coach, all of a sudden he leaves, goes to Texas A&M because there's more money out there. I think that's my problem when you point at what Jimbo Fisher's trying to say. I like the analogy. I understand where he's going with it, but there's so many other angles when it comes to commits right now, because listen, there have been guys at a couple of different SEC schools. This happened to Alabama last year where they just don't have enough room for them. You have a hard 25 cap right now to where all of a sudden, you get to sign a day, hey, we got an extra signature we didn't think we were going to have. We actually don't have a spot for you. We're going to have to gray shirt you. We're going to have to blue shirt you.
Right.
So there's so many different angles of it, and it is funny to hear Jimbo say it as, hey, you're marrying this thing. Well, all of a sudden, a lot of those people that married Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, Jimbo walked out on that marriage.
Exactly.
There was some adultery going on.
Exactly, dude. You left us with the house payment, man.
Yeah.
What's going on here? So it's it's kind of a creepy business, to be honest with you. I mean, it's kind of
seedy.
Seedy, kind of creepy business. And I'm all for the players protecting themselves because, they're the little guys in this situation. After all, they're the high school kids in this situation, and you got the mega university machine out there, talking sweet nothings in your ear, and then the next thing you know, it's like I'm committed to this school, and then the kids having to go back on Twitter and say, I'm not committed anymore because they decommitted me.
Right.
They found somebody better that they like. So I'm all for the kids in this thing. All right, item number 6 on our 1st and 10, and UGA not hurting for options at right tackle. Bulldogs got very fortunate last year. They were looking for a right tackle, and Andrew Thomas, the kid from Pace Academy in Atlanta, came in right away and played right away. Well, now they have the same problem again at right tackle because Andrew Thomas is now the left tackle.
Yeah, I think it's what pops out to me about this position battle amongst all the other position battles that we're talking about, and Dog Nation has done a great job of covering this. The talent at this particular position battle, we've got Isaiah Wilson, who's probably the favorite. He's a redshirt freshman. He's 6'7". He was a 5-star recruit. Go back to the second option, Cade Mays, early enrollee out of Knoxville. All of a sudden, he's down there, 5-star recruit. Then you go back, a guy in Ben Cleveland who made a home at guard, but really has that tackle kind of body when you talk about the right guard position at Georgia last year. Ben Cleveland, 5-star recruit. I mean, when you talk about the depth of the options Georgia is going to be able to have to throw at this is Kirby Smart's dream. When Kirby Smart started recruiting, when he got to Georgia, this is exactly what he was talking about, the competition and everybody really being able to step at the plate because you know what? 5 stars replacing 5 stars replacing 5 stars is exactly what the best programs in the country are built on. And Kirby Smart talked a lot, and BA's done the same thing about what Nick Saban does at Alabama. That's exactly what happens. You got 5-star on top of 5-star at different positions, and no matter where you turn, you've got a quality player.
Yeah, Isaiah Wilson, 5-star red shirt. He was a 5-star, came in red shirt this past year. He's an option for him there at right tackle. Cade Mays, who was the kid who was a Tennessee kid, right?
Yeah.
Knoxville flipped, ends up going to Georgia. He's an option there. And Ben Cleveland, I don't know how much of an option Ben Cleveland. Of course, Ben Cleveland came on
dark horse,
strong for them down the stretch and played well, took over the right guard position. But then again, you create another problem, right? If Ben Cleveland moves to right tackle, now you got a right guard position to fill. But the point that you make is very valid. If you just have depth of 5 stars, and then it doesn't matter. You can be interchangeable, and you can plug and fill.
Yeah, but Ben Cleveland's ability to play those other positions really might be what his downfall might end up being as far as right tackle. Can you get Trey Hill? Can you get Jamari Sawyer ready for those guard positions sooner than later? Or does a Solomon kid turn up being better than he was last year, and all of a sudden you got some options with Ben Cleveland? That's probably another conversation for another day. Right now, let me tell you about MyBookie. You guys, we've been talking about MyBookie all week. It's time to talk about a boatload of money that you can make this week by betting at MyBookie. The madness of March is here. Lay down some money and score big on college hoops. Are you sick and tired of getting the runaround when asked for your payouts? Then come join MyBookie today. Enter the promo code SEC Live. Visit MyBookie today. Play, win, get paid. You guys go do it. It's March Madness. It's a ton of fun.
All right, there you go. Let's move along here. Our 1st and 10 and item number 7 on our agenda here. Wow. Is that a loaded question? Can Derek Dooley save Barry Odom? I don't know. I hope Barry's not counting on that.
Yeah.
But, of course, he's brought Derek Dooley in as his offensive coordinator, despite the fact Dooley's never been an OC and never been a quarterback coach. But now you turn the offense over to Derek Dooley. Is this, remember Barry Odom ended up at midseason, he just burned everything?
Right, yeah. Like the trash
stunk.
can fire.
So does he throw Derek Dooley, just kidding, in the fire at some point in this season and say, probably made a mistake? I don't know. Derek Dooley, nice guy. I've met him, worked with him before, back when he was a Tennessee coach. But to me, he's a guy that, to me, has had a coaching career based on his last name, based on the fact that he came from the Saban tree, and he's been able to live off that.
Yeah, and we got the quote here, I think, loaded up from the story today when we're talking about Derek Dooley. And this is from Dennis Dodd over at CBS. Locke is coming off a record-setting season where he threw the most touchdown passes. After deciding to bypass the draft, he decided he was going to come back and be one of the top prospects next year. He's also a piece of the fulcrum in which the careers of Dooley and Coach Barry Odom may tilt. Missouri's confident, gregarious, outgoing offensive coordinator quarterbacks coach is comfortable in his own skin. Still, he gets why folks are questioning his credentials for the job. In his 21-year career, Dooley has never called an offensive play or coached quarterbacks. And I think this really pops out to me for this reason. If you're Barry Odom and you know that your career at Mizzou, by the way, well-calculated timing on burning the stuff last year because his next 2 games were Idaho and UConn, and then he's able to get that offense back on track.
Well, yeah, they didn't play a team with a winning record after that.
Yeah,
so
my question is this: if you're Barry Odom and obviously you hired Derek Dooley, are you not aiming any higher than this? If you know that your job at Missouri, it really hinges on your next offensive coordinator. Josh Heupel was incredible, did great things with that offense at times last year. He moves on to UCF. Derek Dooley's your option? Derek Dooley, the guy who went, 11-20 at Tennessee, something like that?
Well, let me ask you, though, what are his options realistically? If you're an offensive coordinator with some merit and you've got aspirations to climb the coaching ladder, are you going to Missouri?
That's a great question.
With Barry Odom and where the season looked at the halfway point, there were a lot of people who thought that Odom would not survive the season. And he saved himself. The schedule was weak in the back half, and they were better than, they were an average team, but better than the last 5 or 6 teams on their schedule, right?
Yeah,
weren't they?
We're getting comments in the comment section over here on YouTube. Philo Beto says if they can't win more than 7 games in Locke's senior year, then Odom is gone. Listen, I got to be honest with you at this point. I talked about this last year with Butch Jones. I don't think there's any way that Barry Odom saves his job this year. I think that you kind of get the 6th win, maybe you scratch your way into a bowl game. I just don't think Barry Odom's the answer. I think if you're burning stuff midway through your 2nd year at the helm as a head coach, there probably is another direction Missouri will look at this year. I don't think Derek Dooley's a savior in any way.
Well, I think that's probably the answer, though. That's why you end up.
The answer is no.
That's why you end up with a Derek Dooley as your offensive coordinator. You don't have a lot of options there.
Yeah.
The job is not that attractive. The security of the job is not that attractive.
Now, I agree with you, but in my opinion, if you're Barry Odom, I think you'd go out and get some kind of young gun. You find another Josh Heupel. You find, like when Chad Morris went to Clemson, you find one of those type younger guys and come in. Derek Dooley never even called.
Those guys don't want to go there.
You can find somebody young enough that's climbing in the coaching ranks, a wide receiver coach at Memphis or something that wants to, come up to Missouri and be a head coach.
Okay, Derek Locke, by the way, I've been on our show we did on Thursday nights all last college football season. I'm on this thing. I'm not really sold on Derek Locke.
Drew Locke, yeah.
What did I say? Derek? I'm sorry, pardon me. Drew Locke. I don't know why I said Derek. Anyway, Drew Locke. Look at his numbers this past season. He had 44 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. These numbers are totally inflated against teams with a winning record, and by winning record I mean a team that was 7-6 or above. So not necessarily world beaters, just if you were able to finish 500. He threw 11 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. Against the bottom feeders, upon which they turned their season around, he was 33-6. So when he plays teams that are even just marginally good, just above 500, the numbers don't wow you. So I don't want to hear any more Drew Locke arguments that start with he threw 44 touchdown passes last year.
Yeah, I understand that. And listen, that 6-game winning streak, Idaho, UConn, a Florida team that got blown out, and that was the end of Jim McElwain's career. Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. Those aren't the teams you're going to hinge your yearly statistics on at all. So I understand why Barry Odom gets the next year, but I'm just telling you, I think this is the end of the road for him in 2018.
And not one of those teams that you mentioned, over 500, and all those teams upon which he kind of feasted. And of course, not to mention that he got a huge jump start when they played Missouri State.
Yeah.
FCS team in the opener.
7 touchdowns.
And threw 7 touchdowns. Well, you take those right out of the mix right there, so that's 37, still a strong number. But you go back to what I was pointing out, against winning teams, not really lighting it up, not quite to the point that people want to exaggerate. All right, item number 8, South Carolina college football bracket buster. We're using the bracket buster vernacular as we use this time of the year for the college basketball playoff. But the article was written, I think it was a CBS, Sports
Sports Illustrated, I think.
Sports Illustrated, one of those, wrote this story and talking about how South Carolina could play a big, and this is nothing new. I mean, they play Georgia and South Carolina every year. Here's the young lady name, or I don't know if she's young or not, but a lady for Sports, she might be old, for Sports Illustrated writes, they do have 2 prime opportunities to play spoiler, their SEC opener against Georgia and their season finale against Clemson. This is nothing new. They play both those teams every year, so you could write this story every year. Beating the Bulldogs would certainly put South Carolina in the SEC East driver's seat, but it would also severely damage Georgia's chances at back-to-back playoff berths. Again, we hear this storyline every year. That would force the Bulldogs to be perfect the rest of the year. Not necessarily so. Teams have won the SEC East with 5-3 records, but that would put you out of the college football playoff. A loaded slate includes LSU and Auburn, presumably Alabama, the SEC title game. Blah, blah, blah. Should get it that far to have a shot. So I don't think there's anything really here in this story. South Carolina plays Georgia every year. They play Clemson every year. So in that regard, they have a chance to be a spoiler every year to those team seasons. Will Muschamp, by the way, in his 6 seasons against his alma mater as a head coach, of course he played at Georgia, he's 1-5 against Georgia.
Right.
0-2 at South Carolina. He's 0-2 against Clemson at South Carolina, 55-7 and 34-10 losses. I don't think that South Carolina is any more of a spoiler for Georgia and Clemson seasons this year than they would be in any year.
Really? You don't think?
Well, I don't think Georgia. To make that argument, I guess you're saying South Carolina's better, but is Georgia and Clemson, no less better than they were last year?
Right. I think that's, to me, what's the interesting part of the story. I think what Joe Neeson is saying here is South Carolina's gotten a little better. Maybe Clemson's not as good. Maybe there's a quarterback competition with Kelly Bryant. Maybe they go with a Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Georgia takes a step back this year. And I think what she's trying to say is Clemson and Georgia are more ripe for the taking, and maybe South Carolina is an improved football team. That's where you get the bracket bust. That's where Georgia's the number 1 seed, and Clemson's the number 1 seed. These guys are going to cruise the college football playoff. Then all of a sudden South Carolina jumps up and bites you. I understand what she's saying. I've told you guys before out in the comment section, I'm not as high on South Carolina as some of the other national pundits are. I think they won some games last year they probably shouldn't have.
I thought Coach Boone did a great job last year. They exceeded expectations last year. I just see this as kind of this is your typical, it's the month of March. We got to look at let's go look at the schedules and see where teams might get upset. But you could write this story every year because South Carolina plays Georgia and Clemson every year. So that's where I'm on that. Okay, number 9. Kermit Davis headed to Oxford. This is our basketball. And this is actually a 2-part story. Kermit Davis, who has had great success at Middle Tennessee, apparently is going to be the new basketball coach at Ole Miss. And the other half of this story, breaking this afternoon, you can read about it on Dog Nation, is that Thad Matta, the guy that Georgia apparently was ready to offer the job to. I mean, they according to Dog Nation, Chip Towers does a tremendous job. All those guys writing was ready. They're calling a press conference today to announce that Thad Matta is going to be the coach. Thad Matta turns down what was a 5-year, $16 million offer, significant improvement, $1 million more per year than they were paying Mark Fox to be the head coach. So those are your 2 coaching stories coming out of the SEC today.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to act like I know a ton about Kermit Davis coming over from Middle Tennessee. Ole Miss fans can tell me about that, and I'm sure we'll learn more about him. But you tell me, Thad Matta turning down this Georgia job, how big of a knock is that for a Georgia basketball program that's scratching and clawing and trying to find somebody to lead this program? I mean, where do they turn now? Obviously, maybe Tom Crane.
Tom Crean. I think Ron Hunter at Georgia State's a dark horse there. I mean, my goodness, he's taken the team to 2 conference championships in the NCAA tournament in the last 4 years. I think you could do a lot worse than Ron Hunter there. And I bet, I know he says he's not all about chasing money. He's happy at Georgia State. Golly, I mean, I think if you offered him what you were offering Mark Fox, $2 million a year.
Oh, yeah, he's all over.
I mean, I think Athens looks pretty good at $2 million a year.
Yeah.
It goes a long way in Athens, Georgia. I'm not saying there's plenty of candidates out there. Georgia's just got to find the right one. I don't know. You asked what does this say that Thad Matta turned him down. To me, it says that Thad Matta, he's got that contract with Ohio State, and he got paid in full even though he was let go. He got paid in full, the full 3 years, got a big lump sum, and he's still getting monthly checks from those guys. Part of the stipulation of his contract is he's got to actively continue to pursue other jobs, and if he gets a job, they stop paying him.
Yeah.
He's got really no incentive.
Yeah,
I
agree.
He's getting a big chunk of money every month or however often he gets paid. Just sit there and play golf or whatever it is he likes to do for a living without coaching. He's just under no He's under no pressure or no motivation or urgency to go get a college basketball coaching job right now. He can sit and wait, and there's going to be more college coaching jobs that come open.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you know, I think Tyler Mann says in the comment section here on YouTube best. He's getting paid $100,000 monthly from Ohio State. All he has to do is apply for some of these jobs.
Right, and that's exactly what happened here. Exactly what happened here. Well, I mean, if you were getting $100,000 a month to do nothing,
I think I'm playing a lot of golf.
I'd wait until the $100,000 ran out.
I think I'm playing a ton of golf.
And then I'd check my bank account and see how much money I got. Am I going to be able to retire? I'm guessing that he could. And then you decide at that point, do I really want to coach? Again, he's under no urgency to do it. Georgia will move on. Georgia will find somebody interesting. I think it'll be interesting if they actually got serious about Ron Hunter. Do they have the guts? Do they have the guts? Because that's a gutsy move. Yeah. That's a gutsy move to go to Georgia State. I mean, for Georgia, the redheaded stepchild of the state, the team they won't even play in basketball, and say, I know we wouldn't play you in basketball, but we want you to be our coach. Right. It'd be interesting to see if something like that happened. All right, item number 10. We are running out of time. And all you volunteer fans, you ought to be happy about this. Jeremy Pruitt is scrapping the point system that they use for their Big Orange spring football game and the Circle of Life drills and all the nonsense that they had. And I think it was nonsense. All the nonsense that they had surrounding their spring football game and the 120 to 119 scores and stuff like that, they're getting rid of it.
Yeah, Butch Jones' Circle of Life, and you get points for one guy on one guy from certain teams. Listen, this is Jeremy Pruitt, Tennessee fans. This is Jeremy Pruitt saying, I don't have time for all that. Where I come from, we play, ones versus ones and twos versus twos, and you have two teams match up and you play football. They're quarterbacks, no contact. He's not going to do any more of this Butch Jones stuff. I have to think that it's absolutely poetic for Tennessee fans to come out and hear stuff like this.
Yeah, if you're going to have a spring football game, and I think everybody should, and I'm sorry, Vandy, shame on you that you're not having a spring football game. Everybody should have a spring football game. The spring football game is for the fans, by the way.
Yeah.
It's for the fans. I mean, how many things get settled from a depth chart and roster standpoint in spring football game?
Not a ton.
Zero. The starters come out, they play, 8-9 minutes, and then, the star of the spring football game is always some dude who's a walk-on or number 9 on the depth chart. He rushes for 100 yards, and it's his moment in the sun. Look, the spring football game is just so the fans can get a little fix of football until they have to go back into hibernation on football until
it's a dress rehearsal.
It is.
It's a dress rehearsal.
And so if you're going to have it, just play it. Play it like a football game. Don't let your quarterback get hurt. Try not to let anybody get hurt, but do away with the point systems and all that kind of stuff. And have one, by the way. If you're in the SEC, you got to have a spring football game. And again, Vandy, shame on you for not having a spring football game.
Come on, Derek Mason.
Yeah, come on, man. Come on. Y'all can do better than that. I've done the spring football game at Vandy, and it was like 50 people. That was back before. No, James Franklin. Yeah, he tried to get the audience there. But they typically don't draw very well for that. They don't draw very well for regular season games either. All right, we got to go. But hey, first, we were talking about Butch Jones. His legacy does live on here
always,
every day on SEC Country Live, and it's our daily Champion of Life. And here's our Champion of Life today.
Today we've got Elsa.
What the heck is that? Dude dressed up as Elsa. And that's your first question.
It's the paddy wagon.
Why is a dude dressed up by Elsa trying to push the paddy wagon out of the snow?
I have no background on this story, but this is one of the most awkward and strange videos I think we've ever played in Champions Life. This guy is literally dressed up as Elsa from Frozen, which is a movie I have not seen, by the way.
It is Frozen, by the way. That's the only thing that is appropriate about this is that it is Frozen, but he's dressed up as Elsa and pushes the police paddy wagon out of the snow, which qualifies you on this March 14th, 2018 as a Champion of Life on SEC Country Live. Wow.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there.
We did. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Hans Heiser is going to be in here tomorrow, filling in for BA, and then BA is going to be back next week, so we look forward to that. We've missed him. He's been on assignment all week working on some Georgia stuff, so he'll be back next week. Mike, great working with you again,
Absolutely.
brother.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Had a lot of fun today. Thanks to everybody who took time to post with us today. Had a lot of fun today as well, and that is today's edition of SEC Country Live. We'll see you again sometime.